Hey guys, today I want to address one of the most, intense experiences that is involved in PMDD, and that is dealing with intrusive thoughts. Having intrusive thoughts can feel so overwhelming. I remember for myself, a lot of times getting stuck in that thought spiral felt a lot like getting trapped under the ocean, right? When those waves are just spinning you out of control and there's like no moment to orient before the next wave comes in, and they're often hitting us so fast that it feels very much like we're no longer in control. These thoughts are happening to us, and there doesn't feel like a way out. So I want to talk about is where are these thoughts coming from? What's the process that's happening? And then we'll talk about some ways to work through this. So when it comes to intrusive thoughts, I think so often we get stuck in these spirals because we think the thought is the thought is the problem. So we're going to address it head on, right? So when we get an intrusive thought that's telling us that we're broken, or it's telling us that we'll never be good enough, or that everything everyone else has said about us our whole life is true, and like all of these negative thoughts start coming at us, we try to combat the thought. But often in those moments where we're feeling our worst, where, we're stuck in this loop, our brain is in problem mode. And so it's not going to do us any favors in terms of coming up with evidence that the thoughts it's giving us is not true. And this is where I think there's a problem in how we approach intrusive thoughts is we're addressing it at this mental level. And so I think what we often do is we try to combat those thoughts as much as we can until it becomes too overwhelming for our nervous system, and then we disassociate. And we may do this through substances, we may do this through scrolling or TV or reading. Like there's lots, just shutting down, just going somewhere else in our mind, or getting outside of our body even more. And there's lots of ways that we do this, and there's lots of ways to disassociate that are not inherently bad or harmful. But it's still, we're getting stuck in this headspace and then we need to escape it. But what I want to kind of throw out to you today is that the thoughts aren't actually the origin of the problem, and they're not really where we should be looking. Because what's actually happening before that thought is a change physiologically. We feel the sensation of anxiety before we have the anxious thoughts. We feel the sensation in our body of depression before we feel and have the thoughts that tell us that we're depressed, right? So this is starting in our body. These are signals from our environment telling us that we're not safe, that feels like threats, and our body responds. And then our conscious brain throws out thoughts to make sense of that experience. And it's getting those thoughts right from past experience, from core beliefs. It's saying, when we felt like this in the past, this is what has been true. And that doesn't mean every time you felt that in the past, it has led to this series of events. But this can also be, from a trauma, whether a big T trauma or a little t trauma, where it's like, as a child, when I had this experience, this is what it meant about me. This is what people thought about me. This is what they said about me. Was my experience. And so our brain and our bodies will repeat those stories as a way to keep us safe from being in those positions again, from feeling the same way, having the same outcome. So even if that's not like playing out in real time, that's what this intrusive thought spiral is doing. So it is a safety mechanism, but if we get stuck here, it is not safe for our bodies. It's not safe to be stuck in that, especially when there's not an actual threat, right? When that story is not actually playing out in real time, where you need to, use this energy, whether fight, flight, or fawn, or freeze, like this is now a necessary response to keep you physically safe. It is actually, keeping our nervous system in overdrive or shutdown, which is not where we want to be, to feel our best, to have self-compassion, to, feel as capable and really present as we want to be. And in my coaching work, we do go a lot deeper and address kind of what are these core beliefs and core experiences that these thoughts are being derived from, and how can we work on healing those things at a core level as well. But really the first step in being able to get there and do that work is to create some space. like in the ocean analogy that I mentioned earlier, when you're, in that kind of washing machine, you're in that like spiral that's happening, you need to orient, you need a moment of air, right, to start to make your way out of it, to get your bearings. And this is true with intrusive thoughts as well, because ultimately you are the meaning maker. You get to choose what a physiological response, what a thought, what all these things mean about you. You get to choose how much you validate those thoughts as being true, because your conscious brain is also capable not only of telling you these things, but it's also capable of rejecting them. But it's really hard to do that when you can't orient to what's real, to what's true, and ground yourself. So the first thing that we want to do here is create some space from that experience. And we don't create space in our minds with more thoughts. Like, we're not addressing the thoughts directly. Where we create space is by tuning into our bodies and creating more safety in our nervous system, which will then slow down the pace. So I want to share with you 4 tools that are incredibly helpful in de-escalating the spiral and helping you get your bearings and orient and bring safety into the body. And I've ordered them in terms of kind of the least capacity necessary to sort of the most capacity and the most sort of tolerance necessary. So the first thing that you can do, and this is for when you're just like really in it and you just like feel like you can barely, have your own thought or barely breathe, like it's just what's one thing that you can start doing, and that is to count or recite something to start to disrupt the pattern. And if you are talking, and even if you're thinking this in your mind, right, you're disrupting the direction of those thoughts that are happening. So you can just start counting and counting until you start to feel like you have a little more ease, like in your body. You feel like you have a little bit more safety and calmness. You have a little bit more control over what's happening. I also say recite something. So when I was using this, I remember the most common times that this would happen to me and where it would really escalate was at bedtime, because I was trying to sleep and these thoughts were keeping me from sleeping. And the resistance to that of being like, but I need to sleep. If this doesn't stop, I won't get enough sleep, and then my day tomorrow will be ruined, right? And then the catastrophizing from there got really intense. And so to disrupt that pattern, I would recite something. And what I recited was my list of baby names. This was before I was pregnant, before I had kids. But you have your list of first and middle names, and I would just like go through that list until I could go to sleep. Okay, so this is kind of low-hanging fruit of a way to start to disrupt this pattern. Now, another thing that you can do that, again, it does not require a lot of capacity, but is a little bit more beneficial than just reciting something, is to hum. When you are humming, again, that activity of actually humming is going to slow down the thoughts in your brain. It is also going to activate your vagal nerve. Okay, and this is going to train and tone and calm your nervous system. So this has kind of deeper benefits, but it's also very simple to do. So just humming, and then if it's feeling really intense, you can even cover your ears to have that hum like resonate deeper into your body. You can also cover your ears and close your eyes and have that hum like fill your headspace, allowing that to kind of step in and basically fill it and not have space. You're basically like, instead of trying to just get the thoughts out, you're filling the space with something different. And that's the same with the reciting, but with humming, you're also getting that benefit of exercising the vagal nerve, which is going to be really supportive for your nervous system. The third tool that I have always found, not always, when I learned how to do it a few years ago, it has been incredibly helpful for me. And this is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, also known as tapping. And with this technique, what you're doing is you're tapping on the meridian points, the energy points along the body. This is similar to what you would find with acupuncture. And as you're tapping on those points, you're just voicing those intrusive thoughts. And what this does is, as you're tapping on these energetic points, you are disrupting the flow of energy and breaking the connection between the physiological response in your body and the thoughts, right? Because it's not just that the physiological experience creates thoughts, but then those thoughts can loop back and intensify the physiological experience. So we're trying to break that loop. And this is a way that does that, that allows you to get those thoughts out, to get them out of your head, but you're doing so in a way that's bringing in movement of that energy and, again, that ease and calm to your nervous system. But this one, where humming is a little bit more passive, tapping is a little bit more active, and so it would require a little bit more capacity on your part. And yeah, just kind of there's sometimes resistance to doing these tools because our body is so sure in that moment that these thoughts and all these things are keeping you safe. So disrupting that pattern can sometimes be resistant to doing that. So this does require a little bit more capacity, but I also think that with all of these tools, you can add on as you go. So if you start by counting or reciting something and you're like, okay, I feel a little bit more in control. Now I'm going to start to hum. And again, building up a little bit more safety and a little bit more control. And then you can bring in tapping and kind of layer these things on each other as well, depending on the intensity of the episode or the experience. And then the fourth tool is meditation. And this is at the top for me because meditation requires you to be present with and essentially build up tolerance to being with the thoughts without them meaning something about you, without them controlling something about you. And so it's recognizing that the thought is there, acknowledging it, I hear you, I see you, and putting it to the side. And you can visualize like actually putting it in a box or putting it in a chair or pinning it to like a board of like, you know, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not pretending you don't exist. I hear you, I see you, and also you can be right here. Or sometimes people visualize like driving a car and being like, I'm the driver. You get to be here, you get to be here, you get to be in the back seat. You can be here, but you don't get to drive the car. You don't get to be in charge, right? So using these visualizations and meditations can be really helpful way to learn to engage with those thoughts in a way that's more productive, in a way that lessens their power. But I do think that meditation does require a little bit more nervous system regulation than these other tools. And so that's why it's kind of at the hierarchy, at the top of the hierarchy of like, this is something to build up to and work to, because as we build more safety in our body, it's more comfortable for us to stay in our bodies longer and to feel safe enough in our body to hear the thoughts, give them this, you know, recognize that they're there, and also, you know, move them out of the driver's seat. And then with meditation, I just want to add this last note about that is so often I think the image we get of meditation, right, is like, you know, monks, and you're just like sitting there in silence, not moving. And that's not the only way to do these practices. There can be stationary, like you don't have to get up and do anything. You could just be laying in your bed and allowing these thoughts and these feelings to pass through you, not making any meaning out of it. It's just here and you're allowing it to move through. But you can also do like moving meditation. So a lot of people can only meditate, especially when they're first getting started, or if you have ADHD, or things that just make it even more difficult to be in your body. Like if it feels really activating and you want to help to move that energy through as well, you can walk, you can do it on a treadmill, you can do it, you know, on a bike. You can, obviously not with your eyes closed, but just like this act of not having distractions, this act of being with yourself. And if you can only truly be with yourself while you're moving your body and doing something else, that's okay. It can be, you know, washing dishes. Like, I am here fully present in this moment. This can be an act of meditation because it's getting safe in our bodies. So these are just 4 different ways to start to create the distance and the space between the thoughts that are happening and your experience, to get your bearings and orientation. And from that place, you can start to raise your awareness of like, what are the thoughts that consistently come up? Where are those thoughts coming from, right? And as we build that awareness, we can then address the deeper root beliefs and wounds that need healing in order to kind of shift the default and baseline narrative that comes up when your body is not feeling optimal or at its best. So let me know if you are already using tools like these and what your experience with them is, or if you've tried them in the past and they just haven't worked and you're not sure kind of how to kind of introduce them again or approach it in a different way. And also let me know if you do try these out for the first time and just, yeah, what your experience is, how it goes. Happy to continue troubleshooting and continuing this conversation, but super interested in what your experience of using these tools and creating that space is.